The next topic that we want to discuss is rather timely. Um, just having the conversation we just did in Neil's article about white blessing, white privilege. We are in that kind of second week of August, around August 11th to 17th. Day is actually the 14th in the US. And it is the 60th anniversary of the Watts Uprising, the Watts Riots. And we're going to start with Lonnie first because you actually lived just in that community when it happened. So, kind of share with us what happened and your thoughts and how you see the community and society now.
Thank you, Regina. I was but a lad, but I remember it well, being the oldest of three siblings. Um, where do I start? I'll start with the fact that when it took place, it was there was no internet, there was none of those things, so everything was on TV, and you could see or you could hear the helicopters, you could see the military personnel, the National Guard, and what have you. Um, but from my vantage point, and as a kid, you're a little unnerved by it because what does all this mean? And but I'll just say how it impacted my family. Uh, my father, who was and is a traditional patriarch, um, owned a business in addition to his full-time job, working at a textile uh, company. And so he had a business for his side hustle because anybody that was and is a man, especially from that generation, um, you always had what you did for a living, then you had what you felt would take you to the next level. And so he owned a business, and he and my mom ran that business, and it was a plumbing supply business because my dad functioned as a plumber on the side and an electrician in addition to his regular job. So I remember him painting on the front window of the business Blood Brother. And he did it with red paint. And that was something they said that you should do because if you didn't do that, then the uprising, those who were breaking windows and burning down buildings and cars and so forth, would mistake your business for being white owned. And, they would end up throwing a brick through your window or setting your place on fire. And so I remember him doing that. I also remember him sitting down at his business when he wasn't at his regular job, um, and he had his Second Amendment rights, which he used to protect the business in the event somebody wanted to come in and steal some of the things that he had within the business. He had his whole life and my mom's life invested in that business, and it was subject to our well-being as a family. And this I saw, and this was in Compton, California. So this is in the 1965, right? And in Compton, California. And so up and down Compton Boulevard, which was the main drag for the city of Compton, you saw some businesses were destroyed. Some of the large businesses, Sears and Roebuck, J.C. Penney, and Whitefront. Whitefront was a big regional. Um, um, it was kind of like a Sears, but it was germane to Southern California and in particular in the Los Angeles area. And it was white owned. In fact, it was owned by white Jews, to be more specific. And the white fronts were set on fire, burnt to the ground. So you move fast forward after everything's settled down, eventually settled down. Some people died, and from what took place, and we don't need to get into all that. Well, we can, but what took place is you saw the aftermath of what took place. Nothing in Beverly Hills was burnt down. Nothing in Orange County was burnt down. No areas where there was predominantly white, the so-called bad guys and all this, and who you want to get. None of those businesses were burnt down. Only the black businesses and the black community were affected, and the stores and at that time you had I remember well there were You have a black area, but there were Jewish-owned businesses, Korean-owned businesses. If you had the wherewithal to start some kind of storefront or something, to earn a living and make a living, you could do that regardless of the color of your skin and your ethnic background. And they were in the community, but after the riots, none of those businesses returned. Not a one. Sears never came back. J.C. Penney went in other locales, but not in that area where the riots took place. And as I said before, Whitefront completely closed down all of their stores. They shut down. And so it was a tremendous loss for the community. I don't think today that the community has rebounded from that, because the mindset that takes place about it's still, it's still white people's fault. And I'm not negating the fact that there wasn't, racial prejudice and bigotry back then. Of course there was. But people found a way to succeed in spite of the obstacles that were in their path. And that's the point I try to make. Anytime I talk to anybody who happens to look like us or any other color, I says, there's no excuse. If a man can come from Mississippi with no daddy and start someplace and build a life for himself, his wife, and his children, and become successful and endured all kind of racial persecution or what have you, but he said, oh, you stayed focused on the task. He says, son, never lose your cool. Stay focused on the goal, and you won't lose because of who we serve. And so that's what I take away from that. And when the O.J. Simpson and that all took place, and they had the riots again in the Los Angeles area, it was just a reboot of what, in my opinion, what took place in 1965. And when you look back from that time, which happened in the 90s, those communities still haven't rebounded, except in areas where gentrification has taken place. And folks who are upset because they don't look like us say, well, we've been gentrified out of those communities, and the white man has done that. I said, well, we were in there before we decided. No, I don't want to go down that rabbit hole. Let me just state that what I saw back then in 1965, I saw again with the Rodney King and all that took place. And here we are today still dealing with some of that. And it's the same agenda being driven by those of us who we understand want a different outcome for America.
Sometimes hearing it again from someone that was there or experienced it just brings a whole new level of appreciation for all that the community went through. And sadly, uh, the the bad outcomes that happened because of that.
Let me
Kevin.
state this.
Mm,
Restate this because I just forgot something. I wanted to add this.
yeah.
When you are, I think I was what, 9, something like that, and you're riding in your parents' car, you're in the back seat, your 2 sisters are with you, dad's driving, mom's co-pilot telling dad to slow down, speed up, with the wives too. And dad turned down a street because he wanted to go see the aftermath. And he turned down a street, and the street was blocked off, and the National Guard was there. And I'll never forget as a kid, a National Guardsman with, I think it was a bazooka. I don't know what kind of gun it was, but it looked like a bazooka, turned and pointed toward us. That's when it hit home for me as a kid that this is real. And I was, yeah, dad, back up, please, back up, the back up out of there. So it's when you see that kind of thing up close and personal, then you begin to think about people in foreign countries and foreign that are dealing with upheaval and so forth taking place, and what the population has to deal with, and the fear that it can strike you with. Because I was certainly as a little boy, I was scared to death when I saw that.
Yeah, so all of my recall from that riot is all from the film and the biographies of the time. I was while I was here, I was just a toddler. I'm in Northern California, so I didn't experience it. But when I experienced it historically, as a historical event, what strikes me most is the seeming justification. White America, sort of explaining what I think is guilt splaining, basically saying, well, it was the plight of the community, it was the plight of racism, it was the plight of this, the plight of that. Of course, blacks had to at some point reach this point of desperation to make a point. And then I reflect back at George Floyd a few years ago, and I see some parallels in the sense that, again, we have these mayors of these major cities around the country that said, no, 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 let them go, let them loot, let them
Burn.
stand down, let them burn down everything, and just stand down because they deserve it. This is sort of their reparations. There's this meta narrative again, this undercurrent of, hey, blacks are perpetual victims. They can act up, at times when you have these flashpoints, and take advantage of the moment with no consequence. And I think it's I think a lot of this whole thing comes again from the Marxist narrative of a victimizer and victim, and it's so ingrained now in our society at every level that is sort of our default. Okay, well, if we're allowing them, if they're acting up, then what did we do? We must have forced them to do this. And the reality is there's just opportunists. Sometimes these things happen, and there's opportunists that want to take advantage of the moment. They want to loot, they want to, rape, pillage, whatever. And it's not about you necessarily cause anything. It's just that the opportunity presents itself because we have a flashpoint. The sad part about it is that we're going to continue to go through the cycle until we have people, by and large, step up and say, look, I'm going to be responsible for myself, my family, and my community. And, I'm not going to use the excuse of the white man this and, that man that. And, we're going to lay that down. God's got us. We're going to protect our family and our community. And we're going to, be people of with dignity. And we're going to go through this thing and come out on top. And until we really adopt that mindset, we're going to continue to go through these cycles, these flashpoints that are going to cause these kinds of problems. So we got to do better, and I pray that we get better, because right now, it's just waiting for the next episode to blow up again, and then we're going to get out there and act crazy again and just burn down our communities, and then wonder why the stores won't come back. The stores won't come back because you burned them down, and when they were there, you were looting all the time and stealing. And, where's Walgreens and CVS now? Okay, well, Walgreens and CVS is gone. They stay in the Midwest now because y'all acting crazy out here in California. You taking all the food, you taking all the stuff off the shelves. So what they're supposed to do? How they gonna make money? And so there's this blaming thing also that's part of this. So it's an interesting time that we're in, and I just pray that all communities, irrespective of skin color, all communities actually wake up and stop, feeling guilted and shamed and all that, and excusing bad behavior. We need not excuse it. We need to step to it and say, look, this is not the way we take care of this.
Yes.
Truth.
On point.
Neil,
Okay.
our resident theologian.
Well, let's look at this. From the 1870s all the way to 1963, Black communities faced crushing racism, segregation, and chronic unemployment. Yet violent crime rates were low, relatively low compared to later decades, right? Black marriage rates were higher than white marriage rates, and fatherlessness, and this is the point, was under 20%. Strong families, strong churches, strong community elders acted as buffers, and they held the neighborhood together despite economic hardship, unemployment, racism, whatever it is, right? But then in 1964, Lyndon Johnson launches the Great Society and War on Poverty programs. Amongst them is the Man in the House Rules, which you're familiar with, which reduces benefits if a man was in the house. So this creates a financial incentive to break apart low-income families, and fathers were simply kicked out. So just 1 year of it, and get this, by 1965, Fatherlessness had gone to about 25% in most cities. 25% from 5 years before, it was only 20%. And this 25% seems like some sort of tipping point. Research
Mhm.
worldwide shows that when boys grow up without a father, especially during their teen years, what happens? Peer groups, street culture, that is gangs, replace
Yep.
families as the dominant male influence, and violence becomes self-sustaining. Poverty has always been present, racism has always been present, unemployment has always been present, but now they're all present while there is no father in the home and the family unit is collapsing. So let's not rewrite history. You know, I was looking through this and I'm like, what's the Watts Rebellion? I've never heard of the Watts Rebellion. It's a new nomenclature to make it seem noble, but it was the Watts Riots. 6 days of burning, looting, and killing in Los Angeles. And guess what they did? They destroyed, as Lonnie said, they destroyed the black area, stretches of 103rd Street, South Central, Avalon Boulevard, and the very heart of black businesses, black shopping districts. Over 1,000 buildings were damaged or destroyed, many owned and serving black customers, as he mentioned.
Yes.
So what sort of rebellion destroys your own people's jobs and income and lives? This wasn't some sort of noble rebel alliance from Star Wars. It was mayhem. It was a riot.
Right.
So let me point out something that nobody seems to want to mention. The arrest records show the truth. Who were the Watts rioters? The average Watts rioter was a teenager,
Yep.
15 to 20s. These are the very boys whose father was no longer in the home. Kids adapt fast. No father, 1 year is all it takes for a teen boy to go rebel. Well, not rebel, a riot, if you will, to become a rebel. So these were not the disciplined men who marched with Martin Luther King Jr. This was a generation primed for chaos by policies and politicians and by the left and by Democrats that dismantled their families on purpose, mind you. The problem was never racism. It was never unemployment. It was never poverty. It was loss of fathers. And until we face that head on, we're damning more black kids and more any kids, Mexican kids, whatever kids, right? Indian kids, Somali kids. You're damning them to more hopelessness and death.
Wow. Wow, wow, wow.